Well, hello and welcome to an information session for parents and carers of Year 9 students about options. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andy Bethel, one of the leadership team here at Castle, and one of my roles is to oversee the options process. Normally, of course, I would be welcoming you into the school hall for this information. Obviously, we can't do that this year. So I apologise that this isn't probably quite the same thing, but it's the next best that we can do. And the aim of this film that you're going to see, this presentation, is to take you as parents and carers and family members through the process that we will be taking students through in school to explain what options might be available for them as part of their curriculum in years 10 and 11. Alongside this, students will be having information sessions in school. I'll set the detail out at the moment, but you may well feel that watching this presentation together with your child may well be a way of having that conversation and starting to think about it. So I'll take you through the information on screen. I start by thinking, right, we are looking at what students will be doing this coming September 2022. They'll be moving into year 10, then year 11 and beyond. And making option choices is really a first step on thinking about that future much beyond the age of 14, 15. And I always like to start by asking you to think about, when we talk about careers, working careers, for these young people currently in year 9, they could still be working in their careers in 2075. So when we think about, gosh, what's work going to be like for them, there's a scary thought. And to give you the comparison backwards, people in the workforce today might well have been sitting doing their options in February of 1968. Now, if we can remember, probably not many of us on this call remember what February 1968 was like and how the world has changed. It's very hard for us to really predict what the working world is going to be like for these young people in year 9. When I was making my choices in 1982, this how you'll be doing your maths straight away, it's a long time ago. I picked computer studies O-level before GCSEs as one of my options. And the thing that I look back at now is there was only one sort of flaw with that, really, that the school didn't own a computer. So I did a computer studies O-level for 2 years. And at the end of that, I had an O-level, but I'd still never ever touched or used a computer because they were so rare. So the experience I had really bears no comparison with what a student, for example, doing that subject would be getting today. And clearly, what I know about computing now is very little to do with what I learned in my O-level, and is what we've learnt as we've gone along through a working life. So I think it's not a case that in picking options, we are trying to pick a career. It's much more about developing skills that students will hopefully find useful and may then help them get to wherever it is they want to get to. If we look at what's coming, then, as I said, the next 2 years, years 10 and 11, sometimes known as Key Stage 4, where the students will essentially go from age 14 to 16. In school terms, GCSEs is the main aim. That's the sort of the academic aim of the next 2 years. When students have completed that, at that point, they then have choices, clearly. They could choose to go to a sixth form. They could choose to stay with Castle or move to another sixth form. They could choose to go to a college course at that stage. They could choose to apply for something called job-based training or apprenticeships, as we might know it. Those are the typical routes the student has. And our current year 9 will probably divide into 3 in going down those typical routes. One of the things at 16 that is the guidance from government now is that students should still, between the ages of 16 to 18, be in some form of education or training. It's not a case of they have to stay at school. That's not appropriate for everybody. But they should, ideally, continue to be in some form of training rather than simply in a job and not learning. It's not a law, it's a guidance. And I'm glad to say that just about every student moving on from Castle, that would be true for most years. So they'll do that at 16 to 18, and then after that, really, age goes out of the window, because it may be after that they choose to go on to university, or perhaps at that point on to a form of college. It may be that at that age they choose to go to the apprenticeship or the job-based training. Interestingly, there are some fantastic apprenticeships available at that post sixth form type age, at age 18, that companies are desperate to get people. A lot of people wanting apprenticeships at 16, but there's some very good ones that employers are desperate to recruit for at 18. And of course, students may then go into employment at that age. And really, as I said, age becomes irrelevant. And after that, well, that's just called the rest of your life. So these slides I'm showing you here are, in most cases, the same things that we will be sharing with students. So you're seeing a lot of the same information. Some of the language on screen you may see written towards the students. One of the things that very much directed at students is I would ask them, for example, about their preferences. So if I were to say, I'm going to give you a free piece of fruit, I'll give you a choice of the three on screen. Some students would prefer apples, some would prefer oranges, some would prefer pears. And they'd grudgingly say, thanks, Mr. Buttle. If I changed the offer and I said I'm going to offer out a free Mars bar or a Snickers bar or a Twix, surprisingly, more of them would perk up, I suspect. But in the same way, students would divide, and some would prefer Mars, some would prefer Twix, some would prefer Snickers. The key message and the reason for saying that to students is to explain that when we're offered choices at this sort of time, like options, there isn't a right answer. A Mars is not better than a Twix or vice versa. They're different. One will suit one person, the other will suit another person. And the same is true when we're thinking about subjects in school. There isn't a right answer. And the right answer isn't, oh, what my friend is doing. It's going to be different to the taste and the skills and the aptitude of each individual student. So as parents, I would say to you, please be aware about peer pressure. Together, we need to fight that and say the choice needs to be about an individual student's skills and what they will be good at, not what their friends are picking and so on. Now, at the end of these 2 years, students will achieve qualifications. So I thought it would be helpful just to set out the sort of language that's available with qualifications. So GCSEs are known nationally as Level 1 and Level 2 qualifications. The higher grades at GCSE would be Level 2, the lower grades would be a Level 1. This is a scheme set up by the government nationally to allow comparison between different types of qualifications. So, for example, you may have heard of BTECs, and they exist at Level 1 and Level 2, and also at Level 3. And it means if two qualifications are both at Level 2, then they are equivalent. They should carry the same weight and worth, and essentially level of difficulty. So in years 10 and 11, students will generally be working at levels 1 and 2. Below level 1, there are some qualifications known as entry level. So if a student is not really able to work at the GCSE grade level, there are some qualifications known as entry levels. And occasionally we use those, something like science, we might use those alongside GCSE for a few students. If students then move on from GCSE, they would typically, if they've achieved level 2, they've got, for example, higher grade GCSEs, they might then move up to level 3 qualifications. The most famous level 3 qualifications would be A-levels, but there will be BTECs, there will be national diplomas and so on, all at level 3. And at level 4, perhaps they'll go on to university and do a degree. A first degree is known as a level 4 qualification, and you can even then go on and get level 5 and level 6 qualifications and so on. So it's a national level. When we see level 1, 2 in relation to the next couple of years, that's what they mean. There are also different types of qualifications. So the one that we tend to use as a cover-all, incorrectly, at this stage in years 10, 11, is GCSE. Clearly, a lot of the qualifications we do in school are GCSEs, so that we can group them together. But there is then a separate group of qualifications, which we're going to call applied qualifications. And there are a number of different brands of this. It's really like choosing your supermarket, choosing a different brand of qualification. I've mentioned BTEC already. We also in school use qualifications called Cambridge Nationals and ASDAN COPE. They're all applied qualifications. They're not GCSEs, but they have equivalents to them. And I'll go on and just show the difference between those now. So let's start with GCSE, the more famous. So firstly, at the end of a GCSE, you get a grade. And these days, it's a number. It goes from 9, the highest grade, down to 1, the lowest grade. All of those are passes. You get a certificate that says you have achieved the GCSE. If you didn't reach grade 1, then that's the point when you would say, unfortunately, you've failed it, and you wouldn't get a certificate. That's very, very rare that we see that happen at Castle. GCSEs all have exams at the end of the course in one form or another. That's one of the characteristics of them. So in most cases, that means the end of year 11. Some of them have what we call coursework. That is work that is not sat in an exam hall at the end of the course, work that is done during the course and contributes to the final grade. Not all, but some subjects, particularly the more practical subjects, will have some coursework. Many GCSEs, clearly, from an assessment point of view, are mainly written. It's going to be writing exams. Some, though, we think about subjects like art, and at that end, will be very practical, although they're GCSE. And when we get to exams, the other thing that some subjects have, they sometimes have tiers. That means there are 2 types of exam that you could sit, often called higher or foundation. The higher tier exam would be more difficult, but it would allow you to get the higher grades. A foundation exam would be easier, but would be capped at a certain grade. So you would not be able to get the very highest grades because you weren't sitting the most difficult sort of work. So in subjects where that's the case, the teachers would guide you through that, and that's never a decision that has to be made until later in the course. If the grade numbers that I mentioned, 1 to 9, are unfamiliar to you, because most of us went through getting letters at this stage, then the diagram on the screen just shows the comparison with the old letters. Or in some ways, it shows that there isn't a very good comparison. And that was one of the reasons for switching it. So you'll see, for example, on here, that a grade 9 is actually judged to be slightly higher than an A-star. That means in the country, there will be less grade 9s given out each year than there were A-stars under the old system, which changed about 5 years ago. People often ask about the C. People in GCSEs often knew there was the C, important to say, what if you get C or above? There isn't an exact comparison here. You'll see a C is somewhere between a 4 and a 5. So if you like, a 4 is the baseline of what we might call a higher pass at GCSE, but some people will say 5s. So a lot of things in some of the professions, if they're asking for some basic minimum standards for entering things, nursing, teaching, they might say, for example, English and maths at a minimum of grade 5 might be the entry requirement for some things. You'll see at the bottom a U is the letter that's used in both systems for the fail, unclassified, that means. But again, hopefully that's not going to be something we're worrying about. So that's GCSEs. Applied courses then, different in how they're organised and focused. The most significant thing is that they're less about exams, and they are designed not to have exams at the end of the course. So for some students in some subjects, that might be quite a significant thing, not having to do that, learning it all for one day sitting in an exam hall. The grading on applied courses tends to be different. They don't use the GCSE numbers. They tend to use grades like distinction, merit, pass, where distinction is the highest grade, or sometimes a distinction star, which is even better. And again, if you don't reach pass, then it would be a fail. So if they're not about exams at the end, what are they about? Well, really, that's coursework assignments. They, over the 2 years, would be doing work that counts towards the final grade. Generally, that is marked initially by their teachers, and then that marking is sampled and checked by the exam board to confirm that that counts. I said there's less emphasis on exams. I didn't say there's no exams. Most applied courses will have one exam somewhere in the course, but it'll only be an exam on part of the course, so a certain topic or a section of the course, rather than being done by what we might call project work, is actually done by sitting an exam. But that's not, as I said, at the end of the course. So that could be sat in some cases, perhaps at the end of year 10, perhaps in the winter of year 11. And that can mean that there is sometimes the opportunity for a second go at that exam. They have sittings during the year. So still some memory work likely to be needed, some exam work needed, but not part of that big pressure that does come at the end of GCSEs for all students. Now, applied courses don't exist in every subject. They're really just in subjects that we might call vocational, that have a particular focus on a particular type of job area. I'll show you in a minute. And if we think about that equivalence with GCSE, then talked about the grading. If we're thinking about students working at a level 2, the higher GCSE equivalent, so if they got a distinction, that's roughly equivalent to getting a GCSE at the highest grades, perhaps grades 9 and 8. A merit might be equivalent to GCSEs at grades 7 or 6, and a pass would be GCSE grades 4 or 5. The lower GCSE grades, 1, 2, 3, their equivalent would be a level 1 applied qualification. And in the same way that GCSEs can lead on to A-levels as you move to post-16, in applied courses, again, we can see you can move up from level 1, level 2 to level 3 type qualifications in those as well. So in our sixth form, we also have some applied courses available in certain subjects there. So to sum up, types of assessment the students would do at the end of the course. There are going to be written exams in the GCSE courses. There's going to be coursework, stuff that counts, done in school and done at home throughout the BTEC type courses, the applied courses, but also in some GCSE courses. And for some subjects, when we say exams at the end of year 11, that may be practical exams. If you're doing food, it's a 3-hour cooking exam. If it's art or photography, it'll be perhaps a sort of a 5-hour exam, possibly spread over 2 days. Drama and dance would be a performance given. So there will be practical exams. So those are the types of qualifications. Let's now think about year 10 and 11 in the whole. Your sons or daughters will be having a curriculum, a timetable, and part of it will be what we call the core. This is the bit that will pretty much look the same for most students. And this is the bit that we're not saying you've got a choice in. So there will be maths. You won't be surprised at that. So all students would expect to be sitting their GCSE maths at the end of year 11. All students will study English. And there are 2 GCSEs they'll be entered for at the end of year 11, English language and English literature. They're not taught separately. The English teachers teach it completely intertwined, but you sit 2 exams at the end. GCSE science, and I'll say a little bit more on that in a moment. Languages, most students will continue and sit French or German. As you'll be aware, it's the policy that all students have that in their core, with a few exceptions. We know there are a small number of students in year 9 who aren't studying a language, so they would be following an alternative in years 10 and 11. And towards the end of this year, we may invite a few more, and we put on perhaps 2 or 3 classes specifically looking at the sort of the ability of those students and giving them a suitable alternative. All students continue to study religious studies. That's, again, another part of the core. As you're well aware, we're not a school that promotes religion. We're not a religiously affiliated school. That's not about promoting that students must be religious, but it's a national requirement that all students have religious education. And we see that as an important way of students getting a view and understanding of the world and the people around them, where a lot of different religions clearly influence cultures, behaviours, and approaches to life. But we also use that as a real way to allow what I'd call some pretty grown-up debates, we hope, about some of the big ethical issues that teenagers should be thinking about that. It might be to do with issues to do with genetics. It might be to do with political type issues. But actually there are things in there. What's the difference between right and wrong? What about individual opinion? How do students form their own views? That subject, we hope, gives them the framework and the space to do that. So all students would sit a religious studies GCSE, but it's what's called a short course. And that means it's a half GCSE, and we'll sit that at the end of year 10. So they get a first half GCSE at the end of year 10, and that means there isn't an exam. It's one less exam to do at the end of year 11. All students would carry on with core PE. They carry on having practical PE lessons throughout, and all students carry on with life skills as well. So let me just run through those. I've mentioned maths and English. Let me take you to the science, because there's often a little confusion over this for parents who haven't been involved in this recently. So all students should study what's called double science. That's 2 subjects worth, if you like, of time on their timetable to cover the 3 areas of science. Everybody in the country has to continue studying some biology, some chemistry, some physics. So the double science GCSE is an equal mix of all 3 areas. There are separate exams at the end of the course in each area. So typically a student might sit 2 biology exams, 2 chemistry exams, and 2 physics exams, and those all the marks of all those are added together to give them an overall final total, and that's the basis of their grade. And because it's a double subject, double science, they get 2 grades rather than 1. In maths, you get an 8 or a 5 or whatever. In science, you get 2 numbers, and they will be linked because they essentially use the 9 numbers twice to create an 18 grade scale. So the highest double grade you can get is 9-9. The next highest grade would be a 9-8. After that, an 8-8. and so on all the way down. So you'll get grades like you can see at the bottom of the screen there. The students get 2 for doing science. So that is the standard provision for students in England for science GCSE. And A-level sciences are written and designed to allow students to move from double science onto the A-levels in science. But there is an extra option, which is sometimes called triple science, that students can get 3 separate GCSEs by sitting some more science. And so they would get GCSEs in biology, chemistry, and physics. Now, we don't run extra classes for this. What we do is, with certain classes, they will move at a faster pace in order to cover the extra topic work that's included to sit those extra bits of exams at the end of year 11. So the triple science isn't harder than double science, it's got more content. And the classes doing triple science will move through that at a faster pace. Now, by saying that, that means a student following triple science does need to both be moving pretty comfortably through the science curriculum, but also does need to have the ability and the willingness to do more work outside the classroom than a typical double science might need. So we actually start students working towards that later in year 9. The science department will be writing to you, and I think you'll have a letter coming home very shortly, possibly even by the time you're listening to me now, explaining about that and the sort of assessments they'll be doing to see which sort of students might be able to cope with that extra pace. The important thing to say, well, 2 important things to say. Firstly, nobody is forced to do triple science. If the science department think that your child could be part of that, they'll contact you and ask you if you would like them to be. It's absolutely fine to say no. And secondly, triple science isn't essential for doing A-levels. Don't worry about that. Double science done well is absolutely fine for going on to science A-levels. And in some ways, 2 9s is probably better than 3 7s, for example, in grades. It's not essential there. If you have any individual worries, please contact Ms. Silverthorne, the head of science, or contact me if you've got questions about that. But they'll be in touch specifically about that. So science doesn't form part of the option choice process. I've mentioned French or German, and that we'll have alternatives for those small number who aren't. I've mentioned religious studies, and PE, as I said, there will be lots going on in the core curriculum, and probably students, I think, generally tell us they like PE in years 10 and 11 because they gradually get more choice about what they do, rather than, right, today we're all doing rugby for the next 6 weeks. You'll find by the time they get year 11, they'll have more individual choice as well. While talking about PE, I'll mention one of those things that comes up now as we start to look at options. Everybody does PE on their timetable automatically, but you can also pick a qualification in PE if you want as an option choice, and there are 2. There's a GCSE in PE, and as a GCSE, it's important to say it is a mix of theory and practical. In other words, written and practical, and the bigger part is written. So if you choose PE GCSE, most lessons, probably 80% of lessons, you're in a classroom doing written work. The practical skills is a bit extra on top. There's also an applied qualification called sports science, one of those ones. Again, no exams at the end. And again, it's not really about practical skills at all, but it's studying about PE and sport and the technicalities behind it. So those are very different from doing core PE, bringing your kit and getting your heart rate up, and so on, that PE is all about. So if you're interested in those, then clearly look carefully at those. One of the things we would say is between those two courses, if you're not sure, the PE staff could normally advise if one of those, and we always have those on at the same time, so that it is possible to switch between one or two quite easily at the start of the course if needed. The final thing, life skills. I mentioned in this core curriculum, students have a weekly lesson, and you'll be aware of the sort of stuff they do there. So as we look at year 10, 11, I suppose the focus becomes a little bit more grown up. Part of it is what I might call preparation for working life. There will be a bigger emphasis on careers. Students will hopefully go out and do a work experience placement during year 10. And as we get into year 11, we're looking then at those individual decisions about what to do next. There will also continue to be all the other citizenship events, the personal, social, health, economic, environmental topics that are really important, and probably an extra add-in in year 11 is some extra time looking at study and revision skills as students prepare for those final exams. So that's the life skills lessons continue there. So that's the bit that essentially the options process is not about. Let's now switch to what it is. And to do that, I need to make you aware of something called the English Baccalaureate. This is a guideline that exists across England on ideally what a student has in their CV, in their passport, whatever we call it, that they take out into the world of further education and work. And the aim is that ideally students have a core that has got GCSEs in maths, English, science, a foreign language, and history or geography, or as close as possible to that. Now you'll notice there that the top four, maths, English, science, and a foreign language, are for most students automatically in your curriculum at Castle. History or geography isn't in that core, so in other words, isn't compulsory. Neither of those are compulsory. This baccalaureate, as I said, it's not a separate qualification. You don't get a separate piece of paper. It's a definition of having that core within your own qualifications. It was introduced as a concept about 10 years ago. It's influenced schools across the country. It's influenced student choices across the country, so that I think it's fair to say the majority of students in England coming out of schools are close to having or have got a full English baccalaureate set there. So increasingly that is likely to influence employers and universities. So without saying something explicit, our advice therefore is that you should give very strong consideration to choosing at least one of history or geography within your option choices. Some people do both, and that's absolutely fine. Nobody's saying you should, but some people choose to. Most people, even before this existed at Castle, we found most people were choosing one of history or geography. And it's about having that broad, balanced centre to your curriculum with other options then around it. So please bear that in mind. I want to just mention one other qualification as we go into here. I'm going to start talking about the different qualifications now that may be completely unfamiliar in the name, and that's ASDAN. And this is one of our more alternative curriculum pathways that's led and run by our special educational needs team. This is an applied course. There are no exams in an ASDAN qualification. It's all about coursework, projects and challenges, and is really about building confidence and what we might call life skills in students who might not have those as easily as some of their peers. So when we look at the qualifications, you'll see ASDAN mentioned. You'll see a range of the things in some of those photos on the screen that students often are coming out of the classroom to interact with other people, whether it's youngsters in a primary school, students of their own age in a special school like new siblings, perhaps folks in a care home. It might be with people in working situations, that they're just getting that extra boost of personal skills that will allow them in the future to confidently move into that sort of area. So that's an ASDAN qualification, and I suspect some parents listening to me tonight may already have had some conversations, perhaps in annual review meetings and so on, with members of our special educational needs team. The qualification on ASDAN is called as the COPE, stands for a Certificate of Personal Effectiveness. So that's the qualification there when you see that. And that's the sort of thing some students might be doing, that where the rest of the year are, for example, doing a foreign language. So as we come towards the option choices, students will ultimately do 3 option courses alongside their core. Now, I think on the list we've got for you, there are 23 to choose from. So ending up with 3 out of 23, I think you certainly can't say there isn't choice. One of the advantages of being quite a big school is that we're able to offer probably a slightly wider breadth than if we were a smaller school. Now, really important to say here, and I will probably say this again at the end, when we're asking you about making choices, we will try to allow everybody to do what they say is their first choices. But I have to be clear, there is no way we can guarantee that. And I suspect that there's no way we will ever get 100% of being able to match that. So it is really important that we are asking you to pick some choices and to pick some reserves too. And we do need everybody to think about that, because students cannot assume, oh, the first 3 I pick, I will automatically get in. It doesn't work like that. The list of subjects that we put out at the moment is, if you like, a maximum available list. Some subjects on the list probably won't run because very few people will pick them. What we don't know each year is what those subjects are. So we put the maximum number of possibilities out there, ask you for your preferences, and then work to see which ones will definitely run and who can get into each class. So we're essentially asking you to tell us 6 out of 23, 3 first choices and then 3 reserves. So I'm now just going to take you through what those 23 are, and we'll look at them in a couple of different ways. Firstly, I'm going to group them into some sort of subject areas. Let's start with ones that have already appeared in the core curriculum, but students can choose to do more of that if they like that area. Now, the 2 at the bottom of this screen I just mentioned when we're talking about PE. There's a GCSE in PE, and there's an applied course called Sports Science. So if students really enjoy sport and PE and want to study them academically as well as playing them, then either of those courses might be ones that you would include in your choices. One of the things to say is you cannot do both. It is, if you wanted to do a sport qualification, you can only do one of them. It's one or the other. At the top of the list is RS, Religious Studies. Hang on, Mr. Bethel, you've mentioned that already. And if you remember, I said all students in their core will do a short course GCSE, a half GCSE. But some students would like to do a full GCSE in RS. For them, they really enjoy that subject. They're good at it. So you can, in addition to doing it in the core, choose to say you'd like to do RS as one of your option choices as well. And you would then get a full GCSE at the end of the course. The third area in here could be taking a second foreign language. Now, this would apply. Some students in Year 9, I hope you'll know if your son or daughter opted for this, are studying French or German as a new second language after school one night a week. If they've been doing that and would like to then see that on their timetable as a second language next year, then they could pick that second language as one of their first choice options as well. Let's then move on into so that was 4 subjects, I think, there. If we move into design technology and look at the range of choices available in this curriculum area. Now, there is a GCSE available called design technology, but essentially you can do 3 possible brands of it. You can do design technology in which you specialize in fashion and textiles. You can do it where you specialize in electronics. And you can do it where you specialize in product design. That's more the traditional workshop stuff, woodwork, metalwork, and so on in old money. You can't do more than one of those because it's one GCSE, but you can choose one of those areas or put that as your preference. The written part of the exam, and rather like the PE, 60%, I think, of those qualifications is a written exam. That's the same exam. That's a common exam across DT, and then your practical coursework will be in your specialist area. So you'll be working and making something in the workshop in product design. You'd be creating a piece of clothing, fabric, whatever, in fashion and textiles, and more than one of those in each there. So you can do a GCSE in DT in one of 3 different practical areas. Also in that faculty area, you can completely separately do a GCSE in food, not called DT, so no link to the previous ones. And this is much more a cooking and catering course, food preparation and nutrition. I mentioned earlier, a combination of theory, where you sit a written exam, but also practical cooking skills. And I think the final exam, you have to cook a 3-course meal within a time, and that's judged. There's an applied course called engineering. So the title gives it away for people interested in engineering. So probably quite close to the DT GCSE in product design, more based on workshop skills and the theories of engineering. An applied course, so again, not an exam at the end of the course, a lot of that coursework units assessed along. And finally, there is a GCSE in computer science, not like my old one from whenever it was, but again, if students are interested in computing, then a straightforward GCSE in that, ideal for those students, hopefully. So, and students in that list there could do one or more of those if there were particular specialisms in there. If we then move to our what we call our humanities faculty, there are 4 different GCSEs there. I've mentioned one of them already, the religious studies, the RS. That sits within the humanities faculty, but that's an option. I've mentioned history and geography. I think all of you watching will know what they are. Students study them at the moment. And as I said before, typically we found every year that those are in numbers the most popular GCSEs. So doing at least one of those we do recommend, or that central core of your curriculum. The subject that will be less recognisable there is sociology. That would be a new humanities subject to students. A subject with similar skills, written skills, quite a lot of essay writing, but looking at how societies organise themselves. How do people group into societies and organise aspects of life? That's what sociologists look at, the behaviour of peoples in many respects. So you can pick up a GCSE in that. If we then move on to our very large arts faculty, where there's a lot of different subjects in here, most of them hopefully recognisable. Drama and dance, again, students I hope have had tasters and experiences of that over the last 3 years now. So you can choose one or both of those. Again, a mixture of theory and practical performance as you get into GCSE. Photography, another subject that would be new. It's a form of art. So it's as a GCSE, it's from the sort of the art stable, but obviously using cameras and technology as your artistic medium there. There's a GCSE called art, and there's another one that's also called art, but art and commercial design. They are more similar than different. And what I would say at this stage is, at each sort of block we have on our timetable, sometimes we normally always run at least one of those classes in each box. It might be to fit in what we can get you into one, even if not the other. But talk to the art teachers to find the difference. They come out with very equivalent qualifications, but two different, slightly different courses that we run there. There's music, and again, students are all doing that. Remembering music, again, a combination of theory and some performance at the end. So it could be through playing an instrument or singing, that a student would form part of the assessment there. But that's obviously a great GCSE for a lot of students who have that interest and aptitude. And another subject that would be new is called media. Media, we all know the word media these days, I guess. We talk about it all the time with social media. Media is a subject that really links English with some of these creative disciplines out there. Media looks at both the written media, both from sort of what we might call traditionally newspapers, magazines, and increasingly, of course, online sites, websites, but also looking at things like advertising, film, and so on, all these forms of media, and they critically appreciate what is it that they are trying to do and how are they doing it. So it's a combination, I would say, of an arts subject with an English written subject there. So plenty there, and I suspect there'll be many students who might pick a couple from there because their range of interests are covered from there. Then we move into a faculty that students will have had less experience of yet. Well, they're only in year 9, the business care and health faculty. 2 courses they offer to students. They start year 10. There's a GCSE in business. So how does business work? What does it mean? For those who watch things like Dragon's Den or The Apprentice, the terminology would be very familiar to a GCSE business student. So they'll learn all about the sort of different aspects of running businesses there. And health and social care, again, a course that's probably through COVID, people have become much more aware and people have talked about social care. But a qualification really looks at all the types of jobs that involve looking after other people, from working in medical settings, to settings like care homes, looking after the elderly, nurseries, looking after young people, to the sort of work people like paramedics do, coming around in ambulances and so on. So the health and social care, a BTEC, so an applied course, not exams at the end, and students would learn about the fundamentals and the skills that would be common to all those sort of jobs that involve looking after people. And so we know a lot of students who might be thinking, oh, I might be somebody who'd like to look after people, to help people in some sort of job in the future. This is often a course that's quite attractive to develop those skills. So I think I've just shown you 23 different courses there. Let's go back and look at them just in some different ways, check if you remembered them all. Some applied courses, those ones that aren't GCSEs. There they are. I just mentioned health and social care. We mentioned the ASDAN COPE, the engineering in the design technology department, and a sport course offered by PE, sports science it was called there. Then there are the GCSE courses. We said the bulk of the options, the majority, are GCSE courses. So there's a significant list of those. If a student said, well, I really like the idea of discussing the real world and writing about it, I like arguing and debating about things, well, there's a range of subjects on the screen, all of which in lessons you would expect to be doing quite a bit of that. History, geography, RS, media, business and sociology. All looking out there, what's in the news today will affect all of those subjects. Courses with some physical activity, well, all of those will have some, clearly, dance, drama, the GCSE PE and the sports science. Remember what I said, but not all the time. In things like PE and sport, the majority of lessons are in classrooms writing. In drama and dance, it's probably a majority art, practical performance based. The emphasis of those courses is more that way. I want to be creative and practical. I want to be able to invent and use my own ideas. Well, there's a whole list of subjects on the screen that can do that. I would hope that just about every student might have one course where they could say they're doing that. All of those subjects, you will be invited to invent things. In food, coming up with recipes. In art, come up with your own picture, your own creation. Same in photography. In music, composing. In dance, you would be coming up with a dance and choreographing it. In any of the DT subjects, you would be designing and making something that's your own, that you've thought of. So I hope all students will be doing at least some creative subject. And back where I started, there are some courses where, of course, you can do something you're already being told you've got to do, but you like it, so you want to do more of it. The RS, the PE courses, or the second languages, if you like those. So when we put them together, put all that information together for a student timetable in September, here are the sort of things then that'll be there. There'll be their English, their maths, their science, their language. There'll be their PE lessons, there'll be the RS lesson, the compulsory one, doing the short course, and there'll be a weekly life skills lesson. So just about everybody have that on their timetable, and then everybody will have some lessons allocated to what we might call option 1, and who knows what that might be. I'll put question marks at the start. It might be an arts subject, it might be media, it might be PE. They might then have option 2, and again, what will be in option 2 for them? It might be history or geography or business, for example. Then they'll have some other lessons given over to option 3. All 3 options have the same number of lessons. And it might be a DT subject, it might be art there, they might be doing health and social care. But actually they changed their mind there. Actually, it's computer science is going in that second one. Oh no, they want history and geography. They're going to have one of those in option 1 there. Or no, it's music because we've missed that. So perhaps that's the one that's going to fit in there. Or perhaps now they want to do music there. And then remember we said not quite everybody were doing a language. So there might be something like ASDAN slotting in there for some students. Or even we typically run 2 or 3 other courses there as well that might fit in. So there's the full list of our options. There's the whole menu that we're asking you to think about. Plenty there, and you'll get all this in written information as well. So here are the sort of questions that we would be posing to students, and I would suggest you might want then to be having with your sons and daughters at home. First question, we explained about the English Baccalaureate. Our recommendation, think very strongly about history or geography, one of them. Or you might even say, gosh, no, we like them both, let's do both. For some students, of course, exams, do I want to do all GCSEs so that every subject has exams at the end? Or do I want to have perhaps at least one that doesn't? Well, I enjoy practical things. Clearly, there's quite a difference between some of those subjects there. So think about that, about having practical things in or not. Again, that question about being creative. Some students want a lot of that. Hopefully everybody wants at least a little. Well, I like that idea of lessons where we're discussing and debating. It's not just a right answer. In maths, it's a right answer. In something like RS, there isn't a right answer. It's about finding different ideas and different people's opinions. Will I be curious about what's going on in the world? Some subjects, geography, for example. Yeah, what's actually changing and going on? What's happening with the climate? That's the sort of discussion you might be having in geography. Will I like project style work? We've seen that those applied courses often have more of that. So do I want to have at least some of that in there? Do I like work which is relevant to real jobs? Some subjects I've mentioned out there, like business, like health and social care, you can see very clearly are about some very linked to particular jobs. Will I like courses where I use IT a lot? That's not just computer science, but subjects like photography, subjects like health and social care and electronics perhaps, where people are doing assignments, then they will actually be using IT quite a lot to do those sort of things. And let's narrow it down even further for these 14-year-olds. What subjects will make you happy? Which will you be good at? And which might you need in the future? Let's come down to that. What will make you happy? I often say to parents, if you think about a wet Tuesday morning in November, and you're trying to get your 14-year-old out of bed on time, and this morning, what's the first lesson you've got in your timetable? Is there any difference in subjects that will just have a little bit of spring in the step? Yeah, I want to do that, I've chosen it. If so, students are probably more likely to do well with subjects they're motivated for because they enjoy it. Obviously, what will you be good at? And this is where you may, over the next month, want to consult with existing teachers. Is this a strength, this subject for them? Because you want to get, I imagine, the best possible GCSE results to open doors afterwards. So be aware of that. And this big if you have got some serious career ideas at the moment, then are there any subjects that you might need in the future? The answer to that one is, in terms of option choices, I think it's highly unlikely. I'll show why in a minute. I think there's very few decisions you'll make this year that will have big effects on any career choices later on. The core curriculum is hopefully doing that for you. So I pose to students some subjects here and say, right, what subjects do you think you absolutely have to have a decent GCSE in if you want to do it? Now I should freeze these on the screen. You can press pause if you want to try this at home. But let's see what the answers are. If you wanted to be a nurse, actually the subjects you must have done at least quite well at are science, English and maths. Health and social care, you have picked up clearly. That has a relevance to becoming a nurse. That would help you do that, but no nurse course says you have to have done a qualification in that, but clearly would be helpful. If you wanted to be an architect, maths, science and art, that is the subject. And when we come to talking about A-levels, which are generally needed to go into architecture, they would probably want something like maths and art would be the ideal sort of A-levels for somebody going to what I want to be an architect. If somebody wants to be a doctor, it's science and maths. That's the academic requirement there. I want to be a computer programmer. Most important subject, it's maths again. But clearly, doing computer science, if you thought you wanted to be a computer programmer, would be sensible because you're going to develop your skills further. I want to be an engineer. Again, that would be maths and science. Those are the absolute key subjects. Clearly, if you do a subject like engineering or DT, do the product design, perhaps even doing computer science, they're all useful subjects to help you develop the skills for that. But no one of those subjects would be, you have to have this qualification to come on and do this in the future. but at least one of them would be sensible. I want to work as a graphic designer. I want to be a very creative person. Well, any of the art courses, really. And art would be just designing those skills that allow you to go on there and then have choice about what sort of artistic courses you did post-16. So here's the thing we need to emphasize with students again, because they'll fall into traps, how not to choose options. I mentioned about friends at the start, so that's not the way to do it. And what I say to the students quite clearly is, you might choose the same subjects as your friend, but there is no guarantee you'd be in the same class at all. So that may not work anyway. Don't pick them because you like or dislike that teacher. I understand why students often think like that. That's part of the reason about their feelings of a subject. But again, in most subjects, there's quite a lot of teachers in this school. Nobody knows which teacher will be teaching your class if you did that subject like next year. So don't go on that. And parents, don't even come and ask me, because I don't know yet. We don't write our timetable till probably June, July. Not necessarily, because my sister or my brother did that course. Now, they might have some interesting feedback, but of course, be careful with that, because are you the same person as your brother or sister? There's not an automatic to do that. I always say to students, well, that one sounds easy, so I'll do it. Well, I think all subjects sound easy if you're good at them, and all subjects sound difficult if you're not good at them. So I don't think that GCSEs, that one is more difficult or easier than the other. They're different, and it appeals to different people. And hopefully you don't get down to the end of tossing a coin the day before you have to hand the form in. Let's hope you don't get there. So, messaging to the students again, emphasising there isn't a right answer when we talk about options. There's lots of choice, and it's about trying to think of the things that would best suit each individual. 270 students roughly in year 9. In theory, 270 different option combinations might emerge. There's lots of help available for students. Starting point is talking to their tutor over the next month. The tutor, in most cases, will know them pretty well, have a good view of them. So encourage them to ask questions of them and to be thinking about what they'll be good at, what style of course will suit them, what they'll enjoy. Mrs. Price, who is in our guidance centre, our careers centre, which is situated out by the languages block, she can help if they've got questions about perhaps specific job and so on there. They can knock on her door throughout the day. She's here 5 days a week. Any student can call in there. If there's things about careers they might like, then clearly that can help. As I said, I don't want to get people overthinking about that at this stage, because I don't think that you're not going to damage a career choice. But clearly, if you're interested in some, then that might think, yes, it would be good to do that subject and find out more by doing it. Talk to the teachers who know you. Clearly, they can give you a lot of guidance. Would I be good if I chose your subject, sir? That sort of question. And any student is very welcome to talk to me or parent to help there. And I do say at the bottom, it's just, I do say to them, talk to your family. Because the bottom line of this is that there's a choice to be made. And I'm going to say this twice, parents. The bottom line choice is yours. When the form is filled in, we ask the students to sign it, but it has to be signed by the parent. And in all disputes, you win. You're the parent. So it is your choice, ultimately, about what the first choice preferences are. Now, how else can you find out more? You're doing great because you've watched this presentation. On 2 Fridays, we're talking students through this and starting to share with them presentations from the different option subjects. So over the 2 Fridays in January, that's happening. There's a booklet that is being sent out to you as well. I hope you've had that by email. It's being posted on our website as well. And if you want a paper copy, we haven't printed 270 paper copies, because we're trying to do our bit for the environment. But if you would like a paper copy, tutors have a supply. So contact your child's tutor and they can send a booklet home. On Wednesday, the 9th of February, is our annual Year 9 Parents' Evening. Obviously, our Parents' Evening is now online. You'll be hopefully used to the booking system for that. At that, think about which subjects you want to talk to. Particularly, I mean, I imagine your core subjects that you know you're doing, fairly obvious. But in thinking about the extra subjects, maybe you want to prioritise those subjects that you think are serious considerations for next year, so you can have that conversation. What do you think if my son or daughter was choosing this subject as one of their options next year? And there will be, when you do the booking for that, there will be the option, I hope, on the list that you get to book an appointment at a subject that you don't currently study, but you'd like to know more about, because it would be a subject that would be new. Please watch the videos about those before, because that may answer the questions for you. Those will all be on the website as well. We'll send you the information about that. So watch the videos about the different subjects before you then do the Year 9 Parents' Evening on the 9th of February. And in the last 2 weeks before half term, during the life skill lesson, each student will go to 2 taster lessons, particularly in some of these new subjects. We run a series of taster lessons. We're going to be asking the students next week to indicate some areas they'd like to find out more about, and we'll try to get them into a couple of those so they can just go and have an hour's taste of what a GCSE lesson in those subjects will like. So that will happen in their normal life skills lesson. A form will come home then, and we'll give that to the students. We'll also email out copies, and we'd like you then to hand that back by the 4th of March. That's after half term, so you'll have had all this information before the half term holiday, time to think about it, and then by the end of that first week after the half term, please then get the form back in. There is space to tell us anything on there. If something didn't quite work for you, want to tell us something, please use that. It's a good way of communicating with us on the form. And what I would say is, once you've handed the form in, it is still possible to change your mind. I know that between March and September, a lot of students will probably have rethinks and thoughts. Now, I can't give you any guarantees, but it's absolutely fine for you to ask, to say, actually, we wrote down this, is it possible to do that instead? We will work through all these option applications from March, and that will take us about 3 months. So you are likely to hear nothing between March till probably late June. We will possibly have individual conversations with you as parents about options, particularly if, for example, we're not able to do the first choice that you wanted, then we would always have a conversation with you about that. But I would hope that by about the end of June, we'd be able to send out a confirmation of the options that a student has got. So in that sense, no news is good news through those next 3 months. So there's a reminder about the Parents' Evening. And I hope this has been useful. I know that's been quite a long watch, but a lot of information to get through, and you haven't had to come out on a cold February evening to sit in the school hall to do this. But I'm very conscious you may well have questions. Do please feel free to email me. It's andrew.bethel at the normal school CSET address, or Mrs. Palmer as head of Year 9 would also be able to answer questions for you as well. Thank you very much for your attention. As I said, I hope this helps and you can then begin those discussions with your sons or daughters at home.